I've been with Skillcat for over 5 years, and in that time, the League community has become so much better than they were before. It is insane how much effort it takes to actually climb these days. I know this for a fact because the Hector challenges I used to be forced into are just not possible anymore. It used to be so easy to smurf even on Yuumi top lane. You just had to build a slow push and win every melee matchup. There's a reason these challenges stopped. You guys are too good at the game. I can't just win by slow pushing anymore. Players are getting better at laning, mechanics, teamfighting, and every skill except one. One skill seems to be lagging behind all of the rest, mid to late game macro. It's the main thing I see players struggling with to this day, and I'm going to go over some of the reasons as to why that may be the case. This issue actually made me rethink a really common saying amongst league coaches that I personally agree with. You do not need to teach someone macro if they've already mastered the laning phase. That may sound odd, but the idea is simple. Most macro is just laning phase concepts, but with different values. For example, you know how you only roam after crashing a wave to a tower? That's because it forces your opponent to stay under their tower while you leave. It's the exact same thing later. You push in mid before an objective to get priority, so you get there first and get vision and whatnot. Technically, macro is just laning concepts, just slightly different. But then, if players are getting much better at laning, why aren't they improving equally at macro? I'm not saying you should have challenger level macro, but why are most players struggling to learn it? I kept thinking about it and I arrived at some conclusions. I think the first reason why macro falls apart for the average player is simply a lack of structure. Think about it. During the laning phase, you can't just do random stuff on the map. If an ADC roamed at level 3 to mid and laned there for 2 minutes, everyone would flame them and you would lose the game on the spot, right? The laning phase is the only point in the game where macro is the same as it is in high elo because you can't do anything else. You're basically forced to stay in your lane, and that's what makes it so easy to follow guides or coach's advice, right? There's only so many things to learn. You slow push, freeze, fast push, recall timers. That's why everyone's laning is so good. You're forced to stay there and apply the concepts you know, whereas later into the game, you have way more freedom, which is a problem when there's so much randomness going on. This one guy is super fed and they're pushing here and your teammates aren't defending and they're contesting this objective and you have TP, but you're half a level down from the yada. With so much randomness to fall prey to, it makes it difficult to stick to what you've been taught to do. I find most players get baited into plays that are not based on any fundamentals. Of course, it's pretty easy for me to just tell you, hey, just do the thing we're telling you to do. We need to understand why players fall victim to this, and I believe that the reason that players struggle with sticking to the right path is due to the higher consequences. For example, imagine it's early into the game and you've got a massive wave at your tower. Meanwhile, your jungler is forcing a fight over who knows what, an objective, scuttle, raptors, you name it. Most of you know by now that you shouldn't leave your wave to help that idiot. It should be very easy to let them die. Yeah, your lane opponent might get a kill off of it, but that's not the end of the world. But let's make that a late game example. Let's say you're a squishy mage and your team is contesting the third dragon. You have no vision on the way there, and there's a Zed or something similar on the enemy team. What do? It's easy now to say you wouldn't go, but let's be honest, you're all marching into that Baron blind and dying. That's because if you don't go, your team is going to lose the fight and probably the game. Problem is, if you do go, you likely die for free and your team probably still loses. The hard thing to do in that situation would be to maybe stay mid and push, then when Zed eventually shows at the fight, you can finally rotate over to help. Except your team already lost by then and they're all flaming you, but that's okay. You need to accept that your decision can immediately lose you a game. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to properly make decisions that could win you a game. Let me show you a real example. In this game, I'm playing Tryndamere. I'm doing decently, but my team isn't. Happens. Anytime I tried to group, I felt miserable. Because I was the only strong member, fights looked like this, where I was trying to kill people by myself and I just couldn't. On the flip side, if I split push, the game looks like this. I'm just doing Tryndamere things, right? I'm not saying I'm doing anything crazy. The game was just easier whenever I decided to split up. Later into the game, I press tab. The match looks pretty bad. The enemy team's about to get soul, my teammates are pretty worthless, so I need to take a risk to try and win this. So I'm going to be breaking a split pushing rule that we always teach. When split pushing, you never want to do this. Do you see how all of my teammates are already in mid in position to die? When you're split pushing and the enemy team has good engage, you should never split in this situation, because if my team dies, I am way too far away from a tower to at least trade something back. But I'm breaking this rule because I don't see any other way to win. And immediately as I say this, Nocturne ults and 3 of my teammates die. Then I can't defend the base on on my own, and we end up losing instantly. This is the hardest thing that you need to work on. I don't regret leaving my team alone there and losing the game off of it. You simply have to accept that in solo queue, you're not always going to be in a comfortable situation. Just like during the laning phase, sometimes a stupid fight is going to happen while your wave is pushing away from you, you've got no mana, and there's nothing you can do. So you just have to hope that your team doesn't die, and if they do, so be it. Mid to late game macro is the exact same thing. You're going to find yourself in awkward situations, except now the game is over if it goes wrong. I believe that so many players are giving in, and they do the wrong thing because they're afraid, even when most of you probably know better. That's why we put so much emphasis on learning how to play in low elo at skill capped rather than focusing on the correct way of playing the game, because you're going to find yourself in way more awkward and risky situations than a challenger player ever would. You need to learn these strategies that actually work consistently in your elo rather than tactics that rely on proper coordination. Our courses account for all the random shenanigans that you find yourself in every single game in your elo bracket and the best strategies to try and carry in spite of your crazy teammates. We prioritize teaching you the fundamentals you actually need to carry through our courses. We're so confident in how we teach the game that we do what no one else dares to do. We offer a 5 division rank up guarantee while actively using our service, or you get your money back. If you really want to improve, use the discount link below after the video. Alright, while being afraid of losing the game can prevent players from making better decisions, I find that there's a Goldilocks problem with macro where it also goes to the other end of the spectrum. Players have this issue where they feel like they have to always be doing something. I swear it is years of stupid buzzword phrases tossed around like, you need to accelerate your lead, cross map this, tempo this, timing window that makes most low elo players have a really bad mindset that they always need to be doing something. Let me give you an example. Here we have a fairly even game with the blue team scoring some kills as the red side overdove. Cool. After that, they started chasing Renekton through topside. He sadly gets away, but because they're all around Baron, Volibear pings it and everyone starts it. Here is the entire map. What overwhelming advantage does the blue team have that justifies starting Baron here? Master Yi is almost alive, Vi is super far away, they have terrible DPS champions for Baron, and the enemy Ziggs is alive who can easily poke them off of it. There is no logic behind this call. They're just doing it because they think they need to do something. You need to be proactive to win league games. You're never gonna climb if you just AFK and farm. So they end up being collapsed on and they lose the 50-50 fight. I'm not gonna say it was a terrible call. It was ultimately a flip, which they happened to lose. They also lost 2 bot towers in that time, so it was pretty bad. This is why they lost the game. I see plays like this all of the time in low elo, like constantly, and I try to call them out every single time. I don't like calls like this. There's no reason for it. If you think about how the game is going, we're in no danger of losing. We're just gonna win, right? At some point, we're just gonna get Dragon Soul and kill them all and win. This is like a risk we don't need to take. Like, even if it works, I just kind of don't like the call. You only need to take risks when you absolutely need to. Otherwise, you should stop feeling like you always have to be pushing the game forward. Stop feeling like if you're not getting an advantage all of the time that you're not doing anything. That just isn't true. If you've ever watched a competitive game, you'll know that the best players in the world don't just randomly do stuff, even in a fully coordinated environment. They don't just YOLO group in mid and randomly start sieging. Well, sometimes they do, but most of the time they are just farming lanes, waiting for spikes. If we go back to this earlier example of the blue team starting Baron, let's just take a look at their gold as they started. They have around 6,000 unspent gold going into that play. In fact, Veigar can almost afford a full death cap. During the laning phase, would you randomly fight your opponent on a neutral wave at the same level while you're sitting on 1,000 gold and they're not? No, you wouldn't do that? Well, then why do so many low elo players do this in the late game? My issue with most players late game macro is that there is very little for me to teach you. Most of you already know these lessons because you understand the laning phase. It's just that the chaos and lack of structure that's going on in the mid and late game makes you panic and force random plays for no apparent reason. Play macro like you would the laning phase. Try to force mistakes or simply wait for your opponent to do something wrong. It is genuinely completely fine to play patient, wait for item spikes, and do nothing sometimes, just like like you do early on. There's a lot of things on the map that baits players into forcing random plays, and the biggest culprit I've noticed by far are towers. Towers are probably the most misunderstood objectives in the game. If you watch any of my content, you'll know how much I hate dragons because how stupid players go for it. Yet somehow, dragons pale in comparison to what players do to take down a tower. Pay attention, the red team has 2 dragons and nearly a 12,000 gold lead at 18 minutes. This game somehow turned into a 36-minute slugfest that went back and forth constantly. Do you want to know why that happened? It's because these 3 red side players decided they need to accelerate the game and overstayed their welcome to take some inhibitor towers, and they gave over shutdowns and a ton of experience. Here is a piece of advice I really urge you to take, and I'm gonna say this, mid-tier 1 is the only exception to everything I'm about to say. Otherwise, towers are completely meaningless outside of the gold they give you. They're not strategical structures for you to take down. Destroying them doesn't open up the map. I had played this game on and off since season 1. I have never seen myself or anyone good at the game take a bot tier 1 tower and be like, nice, now that I've destroyed that, I can push further, which allows me to establish vision in their jungle so I can start invading their camps. It's just not even a thing. I don't even know where that came from. They also don't defend you. You guys know that towers don't hit for anything these days. They are not protecting you from anything. It is genuinely funny to me. A really common low elo concern is how little your teammates care about objectives, when it's actually the opposite. High elo players care so little for towers, while low elo players care way too much. Here's a fun little story. I was writing this script when I decided I really needed a break. Chick-fil-A breakfast was open, and I just went and got me some chicken biscuits. Obviously, I need to eat the food, so when I came home, I turned on a stream while I ate, and bam, Jankos hits me with this within 2 minutes.
But why do we care about this tower so much? It doesn't matter if it falls or not. We are in fact denying farm by not getting the tower.
Thank you, mate. I really appreciate the help explaining this. Do you want to know why Jankos said that? Because his support rel was wasting a colossal amount of time for a structure that doesn't really do anything. In fact, here's the boss, a player who made a name for himself by dying as Scion to take towers. He and his team kill everyone on top side. Then he and Mbessa are in position to hit this tower, except it would take both of them like 20 seconds to take it, which would give them each like 150 gold. So they just recalled because destroying it was pointless. Good challenger players know that messing up tempo to take a tower just is not worth it. In low elo though, I have to watch players completely run it down for like half of a tower's health. Turrets are not worth your life or a colossal amount of your time. If they are convenient to take or you actually need the gold, go ahead. But otherwise, they're not that important. They are not a strategical thing to get. Stop randomly grouping to siege them or trading your life for one. They don't matter. I don't expect the advice in this video here to fix all of your macro issues, but it should at least help you get started in fixing the macro you probably already know how to do. Stop being afraid of losing, stop overforcing for no reason, and stop caring about towers. If you do that, you will improve immediately. Anyway, see you next time.